We're going to continue to jump around the agenda a little bit. We're going down to agenda item resolution 2023-20, requesting U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service remediate and remove future negative impact of birds residing on Pilot Island. Joel, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
You got the floor.
All right. Good morning, everybody. This is being brought up again. It's already been through admin, and I had unanimous blessing there. It's rekindling conversation, hopefully for us, the county board, to support efforts from the town of Washington going back 4 years or greater, and the local sports organization on the island, the Sportsman's Club, as well as efforts from Liberty Grove to try and get the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to do some remediation and control work on Pilot Island because of cormorants and seagulls and pelicans and ducks and everything else that goes on out there. And as I had mentioned in at the admin committee, my personal take on how this should be driven is through water quality. And this past season, there was efforts by UW Extension and beach testing and outreach programs to do water sampling around the waters of Pilot Island in northern Door County. And for lack of a better term, it's all contaminated with bird remnants, that is washed into the water. So the county supporting this is an effort just to keep forcing the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to not slow down on any efforts and actually listen to the citizenry of the county and the island and northern Door to try and do something with bird control and excrement issues around the water. So I'm just asking for support of this for the county board to move it forward so we can try and get things resolved.
Vinny?
I didn't notice in the packet, what's the Fish and Wildlife take on this as far as bird habitat, the role that island plays, and then the data that you refer to, like what is the impact on the water quality? If you sample right next to the island, if you're sampling on the island, if you're sampling a mile away from the island, I'm just trying to get where's the data in the Fish and Wildlife Service perspective on the role this island plays as one of they're preserving it for the habitat of the island maybe, but also the birds. So I just don't see their data represented in here at all. And so I was wondering about it.
Sure, if I could just chime in on part of that, because I think that's one of the things that Joel and the group have talked about. They did some initial samples, and it's one of the first times they actually got some initial data results. In terms of some of the water quality, there's been anecdotal stories in terms of individuals getting sick when they're diving on shipwrecks and other items related to that. So I think when they did that initial survey and they actually got results back with water contamination as relation around the island, I think what they're trying to do now is work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to say, hey, we have samples that's showing that there is more than just on the island in terms of impact. So I think in trying to approach U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the idea is to say, hey, let's look at this as an entire system in terms of the impact it's having on not only the island, but the water quality. So I think that's part of the reason they want to meet with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, is to try to say, hey, there's more to this story and here's some of the data. But I agree with you, there is not a lot of data that's there, but we're trying to do say that we should do more research to help drive this story. And I think that's what Joe's advocating with this resolution, to say, we did some initial work, but now we actually want to go back and do more and collect this data to show that there should be something done.
And I think that my issue with this is that it says remediate and remove future negative impact. So it's assuming without enough data or any data from Fish and Wildlife Service that there is a negative impact. And I'm not arguing one way or the other. It's just there's nothing in the packet showing the negative impact with data that is presented from Fish and Wildlife Service as the managers and people who would be researching that island on an ongoing basis. So if it said find out or investigate, I'd support it more. But the fact that it's assuming to remove birds without that just in front of us, I don't have enough information.
Again, I think part of that was taken from the original one that we did several years back. But again, there is a direct impact. I mean, the island, if you've been by, it's been totally decimated. There is the stuff in the packet that shows the photos from when it was actually with trees and vegetation and what you have in the current state. So there has been a direct impact to the island, and obviously we're trying to determine the impact beyond that, and that's what the resolution's for, but I mean, I don't know what type of, there's not data for that, but if you go and you see the island, there's nothing left to it.
But nothing in the packet's actually from the Fish and Wildlife Service, right? It's letters from people talking about the.
No, the letters, but no, I mean,
Okay.
there's the photo evidence that they've had at the Fish and Wildlife has taken, and those are,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the documentation that you have for that as far as the photo evidence.
Can I make one more comment real quick?
Sure, go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, so my video feed stopped for almost the entire time between Vinny's and Ken's correspondence, so I didn't even hear any of it. But to elaborate a little bit on what you're saying, Vinny, I agree with you 100%. The sad reality is, at least in my involvement in behind the scenes correspondence on this for the last 10 years or better, back when I was the town chairman on the town board, county board, and even just as a local citizen here, again, I emphasize when I say sad reality is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, at least in my opinion, has dropped the bomb on this, figuratively speaking. I mean, I wish a bomb would drop on Pilot Island. It's that bad. I mean, I keep praying that a lightning bolt hits it because it's the best thing that could happen. And you're right. They have not published a lot of information and data for whatever reason, because I think they're under so much scrutiny, under the limelight of public disarrayment of what's going on, that they can't swallow the fact that they don't want to eat krill or eat cormorant, I guess is a better way of saying it. The island is, you've seen it, the island is horrible. And last number I had heard, there was almost 10,000 nesting cormorants on Pilot Island, as well as seagulls and ducks and geese and pelicans and everything else. I mean, it's then zebra mussels and quagga mussels and everything else that's around there. So it's bad. The buildings are falling apart. It's bad. And there's been a lot of drive and effort from locals to try and have discussions and meetings and correspondence with Fish and Wildlife and meetings in outreach groups, almost to no avail, because they don't want to press the issue, in my opinion. There is something going on up here in the island, I think this coming week on March 1st or next week on Wednesday, to try and have a discussion. But the Fish and Wildlife always seems to backtrack and slow down and not want to get heavily inundated with being put on the spotlight on stuff. So they don't outright provide information like you're saying. It's the information is coming from the towns and the UW extension and the water quality that the outer public has been doing, and fishermen and correspondence and testimonies on stuff is coming from the public, not the Fish and Wildlife on stuff. At some point, they have to listen to the constituents of what's going on. So in the water quality side of all the information that was gathered last year with water sampling and testing, at least in my mind, is the first driving spike in getting their attention on what's going on. Because that's a real issue for us.
Thank you, Joel. Nissa?
So I really appreciate the pictures in the packet, for the fact that, you know, growing up in the northern end of the county, you saw Pilot Island, but then years later, you kind of forget what it used to look like because you see what it looks like now. So I appreciate having the pictures because of the fact that, you know, unlike Joel, I don't go past it every day.
Yep.
I don't see it constantly. So you kind of don't think about out of sight, out of mind. And then you see pictures of how it used to be really nice and pretty, and now it's quite the opposite, to put it lightly. So I appreciate that was added in, especially for people who maybe don't ever go past it, you know. So thanks for that.
Alexis?
Thank you. Joel, can you help me understand, are there public beaches or public access, since this is Fish and Wildlife owned? I know that there's buildings out there, but what is the public access, or what's missing as far as public access with the birds out there?
Well, Pilot Island is off limits. I mean, even if you could go there, you wouldn't want to. It's federally owned. It's a bird habitat. It's a sanctuary. It's off limits unless you're part of those organizations. But what has been a direct result of the impact of this is that because the waters immediately around there are so bad, and I've been saying this for 15 years, that they've been coming to, every time there's a south wind, all that nasty, icky water gets washed up into the beaches and the harbors of around Washington Island. And if you look back far enough, I'd bet you a paycheck that you could easily correlate failing water samples at the public swimming beaches to certain elements and wind conditions that have caused it to happen. So it's without a shadow of a doubt that that the contaminants of all the waters of Pilot Island are trickling through winds and currents right up to the public swimming beaches and harbors around Northern Door County. And for that matter, when you got a north wind or something, they're probably trickling down in the Newport State Park area and all the private beaches all along Northern Door. It's terrible. I mean, on the ferry, which is a mile and a half away, we can smell it, the wind going across. I mean, it's that bad. And if that's the air, you can only imagine what's happening in the water.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Joel. And that's where I'd like to go, and to echo Vinny's point too. I know people have worked on this a long time, and you especially, and working with Fish and Wildlife Service can be hard when it's, their property and all that. So these kind of narrative things, I mean, those can be studied as far as water, hydraulic models and where the water goes and all that. So, just to keep that at the forefront too, on what more research the Fish and Wildlife Service can be doing with this narrative information. I want to support this. I certainly, the water quality issues. I just, the text of the resolution with some of the narrative information about, fish estimates and that kind of thing. I'll support this. Obviously, Joel, I think this is important, but I understand this is an advocacy is the right word. I don't mean that in a negative way, but it is sort of an advocacy resolution. So I like that it's in there, but I want to just echo some reservation with the kind of narrative part in this, I guess. So thank you.
Bud?
Yeah, looking at that whole situation there, it's a tragedy, really, what's happened to that island. Mr. Nielsen from Washington Island talked to us a year ago, or maybe a little bit more, and then I wrote that letter. And I talked to some people that are in the Northport area up there. When the wind is the right direction, they can smell these things across death's door. And also, if you're standing in that down by the ferry dock, and there's these birds take off, they fly in a line that you can watch coming through death's door, heading north wherever they go. And by the time the first ones reach out of sight, you still got a stream of birds coming from the south that they just keep going. It's just disgusting. I believe there was some kind of response or something I saw where they have claimed to have increased the oiling of the eggs over there on Pilot Island, but I don't think it's doing nearly enough. They really have to get aggressive on this if anything is going to get done. And as far as restoring the island, like Joel says, you wipe the whole thing off the map, because the way it looks now is just disgusting. And some pressure needs to be put on Fish and Wildlife to get something done more than what's being done now, if anything.
Thank you, Bud. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Supervisor Shomo and Supervisor Hein Peters' point, I think in a perfect world, we as a county board would have rewritten this request, because this is probably the most humorous resolution I've ever read, with all the fish facts. And it's clearly written with some emotion, and that's not going to stop me from generally supporting this effort to have the Fish and Wildlife Service take a more serious look at what's going on there. I think, like Joel said, the island is off limits. You're not allowed to dock a boat there. You can only go there if you're part of the Friends of Plum and Pilot, or going over there for they've done some remediation work on what's left of the buildings. I think we have to be realistic in the big picture. And I don't think the expectation that Pilot Island is going to be a forested island is realistic in our lifetimes. Probably not for centuries, if ever. And I just think that's reality. We have to really step back and recognize that this body of water that we love is filled with many dozens of invasive species, many different invasive plants, many different invasive fish. And it has completely changed the trophic levels of the lake. The fish are simply responding to that. And so, here we have an agency, a federal agency, the Fish and Wildlife Service, that generally, I don't want to speak for them, but just my kind of, understanding, or my kind of observation, of the situation is they manage these natural areas, and they kind of have a hands-off approach. Maybe they do some invasive work, or maybe there's some, they don't do a lot. These are places that are basically left for wildlife. And so here we have this situation where, humans did have we had a fog house and a lighthouse building there, and it was forested. And I don't quite understand the history. I wonder, when I was a kid growing up in Green Bay, the cormorants were all troubled, and they were, because of the heavy loads of PCBs, and the DNR was actively trying to get cormorants to breed because cormorants were on such a low ebb, right? And that was because of pollution and a combination of whatever their food source was in the lake at the time. Well, again, since those decades have gone by, quagga mussels, zebra mussels, quagga mussels, all these things are completely changing the trophic level. So I don't think we can expect the Fish and Wildlife Service to have a good handle on, why the birds are so prevalent. And I don't, like I said, I don't think we can necessarily expect it to go back to being forested. I know it came up at admin. The only bird that probably would cause any issues as far as control, because there's plenty of cormorants, obviously, there's plenty of pelicans, plenty of seagulls. They could do oiling programs, and that would be, to help the situation. The only bird that is on the list that might be an issue, and I know it does nest on the gravel islands off of Newport State Park, is the Caspian tern. I don't know if there's Caspian terns on Pilot or not, but if they find Caspian terns nesting on Pilot, I don't know what that's going to mean for this process. I mean, they may do nothing, or maybe that's another incentive to then get more cormorant eggs oiled to maybe give the terns a better shot. But I guess I just, again, I'm supportive of Fish and Wildlife looking into this. I just think we should keep our expectations realistic. Thank you.
Hugh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question relative to the resolution itself. It will transmit that to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Has there been even previous communication that included our Washington delegation?
I have to defer. I know when we did the resolution several years back, I think that was sent to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and I believe that was shared with congressional representatives. So, I mean, we could add that as part of this to share this with them.
Yeah, should.
Yes, I would recommend that, just to shine a light on it.
Roy?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate what our November meeting of the Door County unit of the Wisconsin Towns Association. At our November meeting, we discussed this quite a bit, and just to advise you that we had a good discussion. We had representatives from the town of Washington, and she gave very good examples of what the Fish and Wildlife could do, because they have done other islands and restored other islands. I don't have that information with you now, but there is something that can be done. So I just want to let the board know that the Door County unit of the towns support this resolution.
Thank you. Benny?
Okay. I have a couple of different feelings. I'll just summarize quick. I can't support this resolution, not by idea, but by wording, especially even it says negative impact of birds. Well, we haven't defined which birds, we haven't defined what kind of impact. And I also think that since these islands have been owned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and their goal is creating and maintaining bird habitat, it seems a juxtaposition to want them to destroy bird habitat without specifying the data, the information for which birds and how. And I just have a lot of issues with that. I understand the look of it might not be appealing, or the smell, but if something is bird habitat, there's likely a lot more birds there because they are removed from most of the other shoreline that is not owned by the Fish and Wildlife Service through activities of development and houses and docks and people and boats where they can't have a habitat. So these smaller islands offer that opportunity, and Fish and Wildlife does not own all of them, but owns several. So without hearing their point of view on what important habitat this plays for, this doesn't even, it says birds, all birds. I think I won't support it. So thank you.
Bob? And then we're going to cut conversation after this. Bob, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only comment I wanted to add to my original statements was just to compliment the town of Liberty Grove and Supervisor Calms's letter. I wanted to point that out because it was definitely well thought out, and really they're just asking for what I think is the most obvious thing, and clarifies some of the things that Supervisor Shomo is talking about. Again, that resolution is not well written at all, but the idea of just focusing on the taking of cormorants, I think, is the important thing here. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to the voter board. That's passed on the majority vote of 16 yes, 2 no, and 3 absent. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move back up to the top of the agenda. Resolution 2023-06, amendment to Door County Administrative Manual, Section 2.17, unpaid leaves of absences. Dave Engelbert?
2023-06 for the amendment to the administrative manual. This came before us last month, was referred back for some additional information, and it's here again now. So yes, Corporation Counsel could maybe explain it in more detail if you want.
Sure, Sean, will do that.
So what this policy amendment is doing is clarifying when unpaid leave is allowed in specific as to after a period of absence due to Family Medical Leave Act. You have an illness, you go on Family Medical Leave Act, but what happens if after that period expires, you can't return to work, but your healing plateau is not too far out? What happens? Do we terminate the employee? Do we keep them on? This clarifies that there is a period of 8 weeks of unpaid personal leave if required by medical reasons, and up to 6 weeks for other unforeseen circumstances. That is not extending Family Medical Leave Act, but is an additional period of unpaid time that employees can take if approved by the county without being subject to termination. Now, during that period, they would not accrue PTO. However, health insurance and some other benefits that are accrued based on just being an employee would continue. The employee would remain responsible for their portion of the insurance payment. The county would continue to pay it. But really, this is just putting in writing what happens after a period of, the main example is Family Medical Leave Act leave, when that expires, if they need a little bit more time before they can return to work.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So as I understand it, this extended family leave option or the availability of it is after all existing PTO and everything else has been used up?
Well, Family Medical Leave Act is not PTO. What this additional leave, the county would require the employee to use PTO if they have it. If they don't have it, it would be unpaid. But during this period, that they do have to use PTO, which would essentially make the unpaid paid. But it's not PTO and then the personal leave. The PTO is concurrent with the personal leave.
Okay. Thank you.
I think it's important just to note that we, and this is one of the things we discussed at admin and why we need to have the policy to be clear on that, is that if I would take family medical leave and I come back, but I don't have a healing plateau, and let's say it's not there, even though I have sick time on the books or like PTO, I can't supplement that. So there's a difference in terms of how you can use that time. So let's make sure it's clear that the policy is actually what's governing it, right? So if someone has, if you can imagine some of these positions, they have a tremendous amount of sick time or PTO in the bank. It doesn't mean they can take another 6 months or 10 months and use up that time to return back to work. This is a policy, you get your Family Medical Leave Act. We still need to have a healing plateau in place. If that's out there, you can supplement that. Instead of being unpaid time, you could use your PTO for that period of time, but that you still have to hit that window or that threshold. If you're not going to hit that threshold, that's when, again, we need to move on. And that's why this policy is going forward, because it affects everything we have in terms of our insurance, our stop losses and all that. So it's actually defining a policy of how we handle those situations. So I just want to make sure that's clear in terms of how we handle that.
Alexis?
Thank you. And that was a good lead into my clarifying question. So you're saying if I'm an employee that has 2 years worth of sick leave built up for, whatever reason, which is possible. That's totally possible. So if I have 2 years of sick time built up, that's a benefit that's been afforded to me by the county, and this policy is saying that I can't use that?
That is correct.
How does, can you explain that to me?
Sure.
I don't understand that. It's
Again,
their benefit. We've given it to them as part of their employment contract, not that we have contracts, but that's their benefit to use. That's why we give them sick time. If something happens where they need to be out for 6 months, I understand the county has business to attend to, but feel like we are losing sight of something here.
I think the big thing is just the interpretation, and then I go, and there's a lot of emotion behind this, and I guess I try to take the emotion out of it, but sick time does not mean you can supplement your employment for a long period of time. Sick time or PTO is still falling within our policy in terms of use, both in terms of duration and how it's used. So again, is your PTO available for when you're sick, having a flu, or for a certain period of time? Yes, but is it intended as a policy or a tool to supplement your employment for 8 months or 10 months or 2 years, as you gave an example for? No, it's not. And that's the balance in terms of how we handle the policy, both in terms of our own liability and coverage for insurance for those employees, how it affects us in terms of our stop loss, in terms of organization. And this in terms of how we function. So it's just one of those things, and that's a good point, and why we're bringing it up, trying to be really transparent. Again, your vacation and sick time or PTO are those tools that are afforded to you, you earned, but they're, but it's also not something that this supplements your employment for long periods of time. That's not the intent of that. Those banks are for in that fashion. And again, it was discussed at the admin committee of, well, why are we doing that? Again, because it has an impact on our insurance. We're actually trying to define what that policy is. And again, we're providing, in some cases, I think if you compare us to other, either general employment or outside employment or other areas, we're being more generous, which I think was the desire of the admin committee. We were just looking for a window to define that. But again, we need to have this policy in place so that way when we go out to the market and we're doing both our insurance and our stop loss, those carriers knows what their risks are.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm not emotional about it. It doesn't make sense to me logically why we would give a benefit and then not let them have it. But my other concern would be like, if I'm as a state employee, there's statutes in place that allow for me to use the leave that I have. So I'm wondering if this policy, maybe the statutes don't apply to counties. Is there state statutes that apply to county employment? Because this policy is not how it is for state employees per statute, because I've looked into it recently.
Yeah, I mean, from the Family Medical Leave Act, I mean, you have your period of allowed, and then after that, there isn't any continued leave.
The state statutes, as a state employee that I am, so that's what I'm asking, just to clarify,
Yep.
does that come to the county then too? Because there's an additional 6 weeks of leave beyond FMLA.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of, that this would be once you're FML leave. No, there is the state counterpart, but it's not in addition to,
Concurrent.
Okay.
I mean, that's a better word, concurrent
Yeah,
to.
concurrent,
So
yeah.
there is a state counterpart to Family Medical Leave Act, but once that period has expired, there is no guaranteed employment after that. And this is giving the county an option to extend employment for a period of time.
Okay. I'm going to move on. That's fine. My other question or comment, I guess, that's not covered in the revision, but is in the original text is language to the effect of if we have an employee that misses a premium payment for 30 days. So if there's one payment missed, the county has an opportunity to cancel their benefits. And I would put myself in the situation of if we're having an extended medical issue and financial burdens because of the insurance issues and whatever else. I just want to make sure that that's flexible and generous, I guess, as well, because one payment and then we can cancel your coverage at a time when you're in a situation where you desperately need it. I would just like to see that extended if we can be flexible with that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Ready? We'll go to the order board. Has passed a majority vote of 17 yes, 1 no, 3 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2023-07, amendment to Door County Administrative Manual, Section 2.5, employee compensation. Dave?
2307. This one also came back to us from last month. It deals with the Health and Human Services Department for staff covering areas of behavioral health services that are on call. And that covers their holiday coverage and comp for all the 7 employees that are affected by that situation.
David, can I clarify?
Sure, go ahead.
Just for the county board's benefit, the one reason it got sent back is they wanted to see the red line version, and the version that we included in the packet actually had an error, which is my mistake on page 31. We forgot to remove the crisis premium other. So we passed out a new one at your table. So you'll see under the current version that you will not see that on the other, either under the current version or the amended, because technically it did not exist. It was removed in an earlier version. So really what you're looking at is on the back side of the handout, you'll see the additions in blue, and that's what's being edited in terms of clarification. So there's 2 primary spots. You'll see the edits. One is just clarifying it for the $150 for non-holidays. And then there's a rate of the $200 per holiday. So in other words, the holiday we're given a bump. And that's both for observed or the actual holiday itself. And then if you recall, we have the 2 positions, which are actually special positions that cover most of those areas that are considered non-primary hours. And again, those individuals receive that premium of the $200 per the holiday to match the others. But also we add in 24 hours of admin leave annually for those 2 positions.
Questions? Alexis, did you have something? Or no? No questions. We'll go to the voter board. Pass on a vote of 18 yes, 0 no, and 3 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2023-10 in memoriam of George Evenson. Jeff?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to approve resolution number 2023-10 in memoriam of George Evenson. And I would like to read the resolution. To the Door County Board of Supervisors, whereas George Evenson passed away on January 22nd, 2023, and whereas George Evenson was first elected to the Door County Board of Supervisors in April 1972 and served through April 1980 for a total of 4 terms, 8 years on the county board. And whereas Supervisor Evenson represented Supervisory District 5, which encompassed part of the town of Sevastopol, and whereas George served on many committees, including property, executive and personnel, resource planning, protection of person and property, Bay Lakes Planning, Natural Beauty Council, Ad hoc Corner Marketing Committee, Fisheries, Door County Hospital Board, WCBA Representative, and overall Economic Development Program. And whereas Supervisor Evenson also served as chairman of the Resource Planning Committee, and whereas George Evenson was appointed and served as a Door County's official historian from 2005 until the time of his passing, devoting much time and energy to support and the preservation of Door County's heritage and history. Now therefore be it resolved that the Door County Board of Supervisors, assembled in regular session this 24th day of February 2023, extend our sincere sympathy to the family and friends of George Evenson with this acknowledgement of his dedication to the citizens of the County of Door.
Thank you, Jeff. By voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Would anybody else care to make any comments? Okay, thank you. Resolution 2023-11, approval of EPA Great Lakes Restoration Initiative Wisconsin DNR grant for European frogbit. Who is the vice chair of LCC?
Fisher.
Right, but he's not here. Okay, Vinny, would you introduce this?
Yes, I'm sorry. Let me just get to the right page number, Joe. Thank you.
Actually, you'll have the next three, just so you know.
All right, thank you. First time I've had to act as vice chair, so it's good. Sorry to not be prepared here. Three. Okay, apologize for the delay. So we would like me to read.
To make the
all of it?
motion. To
Okay,
make the
I'd like to
motion.
make the motion for, to approve resolution number 2023-11, approval of EPA Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, Wisconsin DNR grant for Eurasian frogbit.
Okay, thank you. Would you like, Greg, can you explain this? Pam, sorry.
European, not Eurasian, sorry.
It's your sit back there.
I'm Samantha Coyne. I work as a conservationist in soil and water. This grant is in joint partnership with Wisconsin DNR to inventory and monitor for European frogbit throughout Door County along specific sites that we've deemed as highly susceptible to this invasive plant. And then if we do find it, we will do control methods and hopefully be successful. It is a year-long grant.
Any questions? We'll go to the voter board. That's passed on the vote 18 yes, 0 no. Thank you. Resolution 2023-12, approval of fund for Lake Michigan grant for Bailey's Harbor Ridges Beach Study. Vinnie?
Make a resolution to approve resolution number, make a motion, sorry, 2023-12, approval of fund for the Great Lakes, or sorry, I can't, Lake Michigan grant for the Bailey's Harbor Ridges Beach.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
Explanation?
Funding to do kind of an environmental assessment around the parking lot for the Bailey's Harbor Ridges Beach area to figure out what are the environmental constraints as we move forward with future projects there.
Thank you. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Sam pretty much covered it. I just wanted to let everybody know, if you haven't visited that beach, you know, with the high water, the parking lot often had water in it. And so the thought was, well, just bring in some more gravel and put, repave the parking lot. And it's, I applaud the Soil and Water Office for really kind of helping work with the Parks and Facilities Department to, make sure that we're doing the right thing. And we can't really know if we're doing the right thing until we really understand better what's going on there, because it's a pretty sensitive ecological area, and it's really you're right, near the water table. So it's a good, this will be helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. Alexis?
Thanks. And just for my own memory on this and knowledge for the board, maybe, is this going to look at rebuilding some of the ridge swales there that had been kind of restored before, or this is just focusing on kind of the back end of that?
It's just focusing on the mechanisms at this point. So getting a better understanding, and then you have to think of it kind of in phases. This is phase one of doing kind of a study and looking at the drivers. And then phase two would be implementing like engineering designs, figuring out solutions for kind of the visitors, figuring out the parking, everything else. But we're still just kind of gathering the data so we can inform future efforts.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, Sam, can you clarify, will this study be done like all in-house, all by department employees?
It's working also. UW Oshkosh will continue to gather water samples. The ridges will help us. They have a really in-depth knowledge of that site, so they'll be helping us also gain a better functional understanding of things that they've found in their experience, but a lot of it will be done in-house.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess being a resident of Bailey's Harbor, the other thing that occurs to me is that we're seeing increased tourism pressure. So that parking lot not only gets full, but people are parking all up and down the side of the road there. So it's a whole nother ballgame about parking and access and use. And then there's the issue too, which I hope fits into this study. When Bailey's Harbor built our marina, we built it right in the depositional zone there. And every time we dredge that sand, the DNR does not allow us, even though it's clean sand, we can't put the sand back in the lake, or we can't put the sand on the other side of the gap at the marina there to continue basically adding to the Ridges system. The Ridges system has been building up over thousands of years because the longshore current brings about 2,000 cubic yards of sand a year, and that's from a prior sediment study in Bailey's Harbor. And we're removing thousands of cubic yards of sand and thus starving the Ridges system and the Ridges beach of its sand. So that's a whole nother dynamic that, I hope you guys take that into account too. I realize you're kind of looking more specific to the parking lot, but obviously the sand issue is part of that. And, again, this is important because it's just getting a lot of tourism use as well. So thanks. I'm glad to know the partnership is strong and good and that the Ridges is part of this as well. Thank you.
All right, we'll go to the voter board. Passed on a vote of 18 yes, 0 no, and 3 absent. Resolution 2023-13, approval Wisconsin DNR grant for Lake Monitoring Protection Network and CBCW. Vinnie.
Make a motion to approve resolution 2023-13, approval Wisconsin DNR grant for lake monitoring and protection network for the Clean Boats, Clean Water.
This is my last one, I swear. So this is funds from Wisconsin DNR. They offer counties lake monitoring protection network funding, and Door County approve of us getting those funds. We would like to utilize them. They allow us to work in partnership with the various lake associations. It allows us to do aquatic invasive species outreach. It allows us to also work closely with our nonprofit partners. It's great funding for us to get every year. And then the second part of this is the Clean Boats, Clean Waters grant. And that funding allows us to work really closely with a lot of our recreational boaters. So think anglers, people going out on the lake, and really talk about aquatic invasives in a one-on-one approach with those visitors to our boat launches.
Okay. Any questions? We'll go to the voter board. It's passed on a vote of 18 yes, 0 no, and 3 absent. Resolution 2023-14 is Joe still with us. Acceptance of Wisconsin Emergency Management Planning and Preparedness Grant, Door County Emergency Management. Joel?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 2023-14, acceptance of Wisconsin Emergency Management Planning and Preparedness Grant, Door County Emergency Management. I don't know if Dan is in the room, but this is an annual grant that the county writes. Dan is the Emergency Management Director to do pre-planning and mitigation for incidents in the county.
Right. Thank you. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a pager carrying member of the Bailey's Harbor Fire Department for almost 24 years, I commend this effort. We're a small, and this is talking about Sturgeon Bay, we're kind of a small city. And you might think, oh, the fire department, they've got their 3- and 4-story buildings, they can handle that. But when you get a fire on board of a ship, it's a whole nother monster. Those ships are steel, the floors are steel, the walls are steel, and when there's fire, the steel heats up, it warps. Crazy things happen. And so I'm really glad that we're continuing this effort to bring shipboard firefighting training and tactics to not only our Sturgeon Bay Fire Department, because I, as a firefighter in Bailey's Harbor, I'm also invited to participate in these trainings. And I participated 2 years ago, and it was a 3-day thing, training, a lot of classroom, but we spent a lot of time on board the ships too. We were also able to go and see the fire that had just recently happened, and seeing the after effects of something like that and what happens to thick pieces of like rubber belts that actually end up burning and melting through, and steel that warps and things that pop. This is super important, and I would almost argue this isn't enough funding, but I'm glad it's happening. So thank you very much.
Dave?
Yes, I applaud the effort for the firefighting on the shipboard firefighting, but I think I just want to recognize emergency government and their role with all the fire departments and all the different situations that arise, whether it's a chemical fire or whatever it might be. And they play an important role in helping our local agencies and our local governments with natural disasters as well.
Thank you. We'll go to the voter board. That's passed 18-0, 3 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2023-15, approval of intergovernmental agreement, Door County and City of Sturgeon Bay shooting range. Joel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 2023-15, which is a continuation approval of intergovernmental agreement for Door County and the City of Sturgeon Bay shooting range. I don't know if the sheriff is there, but it's something that occurs often. It's just to share the county-owned facilities for ongoing training and shooting at our county-owned property.
Ready? Any questions? If not, by voice vote, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Resolution 2023-16, approval of intergovernmental agreement, Door County and City of Sturgeon Bay SWAT team. Joel?
One more. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 2023-16, approval of an intergovernmental agreement for Door County and the City of Sturgeon Bay SWAT team.
A motion and a second. Any questions? Alexis?
I just wanted to confirm this is a continuation and we're not creating a SWAT team, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? By voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution 2023-17, highway and facilities transfer of non-budgeted funds for facilities and parks, government center HIVAC system repair project. Dave?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-17 for that transfer of non-budgeted funds for the Facilities and Parks Government Center HVAC system repair project. Sorry, I lost my notes. Okay. Yeah, it's HVAC repair in the amount of $16,981. And there's an inspection. It's shown on page 27 and 29. And it was a necessary repair to our HVAC system. And the money is coming from the department's building and equipment reserve.
I just want to make a comment to clarify a little bit. There are, in this particular resolution and the next resolution, they do talk about coils and they show the same picture of the HIVAC system up on the roof. They are in fact different coils. There's 2 coils for this. There's a separate mini coil for the next one. Even though they look like they're in the same piece, they are in fact different. Just FYI. No questions, we'll go to the voter board. 2/3 vote required, okay. That is passed by 2/3 vote, 18-0, 3 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2023-18, highway and facilities transfer of non-budgeted funds for government center main distribution frame HIVAC system repair project. Dave?
Make a motion to approve resolution 2023-18 for the repair of the HVAC system project. And that one also is a HVAC repair, as Chairman alluded to. This one's in the amount of $13,338. And I believe that one has already been ordered because of the time constraint on the contract. So we still need our approval for the transfer of money.
Okay, thank you. Questions? On the voter board. 2/3 again. Thank you. Dave? That's passed by the vote of 18 yes, 0 no. Resolution 2023-19, Door County Library Elevator Repair Transfer of Non-Budgeted Funds. Dave?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-19 for the repair of the library elevator. Again, we need to transfer some money from the repair account, and it's the amount of $41,500 with 50% of that to be paid by the city.
Okay, thank you. Questions? On the voter board, 2/3 again. This passed by a vote of 18 yes, 0 no. Thank you. We pass all these money things pretty fast. Did you notice that? Resolution 2023-21, requesting the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to consider a plan to repair the Potawatomi Park Tower without an addition. Dave?
Okay. That resolution came forward. I'm sorry, I should get to it. I thought perhaps Supervisor Miller was going to do this. He had presented it at the
That would be fine. Jeff, you want to do that?
I'd be more than happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see there has been a motion in a second, so I'll just give you a little history. I believe there's a motion in a second. I'll give you a little history on why I'm requesting this coming forward. As you're probably aware, the DNR had sent out a survey requesting response from the public to repair the Potawatomi State Tower that's been there for I don't know how many years, long time. Although the DNR did say the tower could be repaired as a standalone, when they sent out the survey, they only included two options, one being to replace the tower and the other to repair the tower. Unfortunately, both of those require a ramp to be attached. The cost estimates are between 5.9 million to 7.6 million. Those monies, because of the dollar amounts, would have to be included in the 2023-2025 annual budget, which requires legislative approval and obviously no certainty that those amounts would be approved. And in effect, the tower would further deteriorate and be able to be repaired. If the tower were to be raised, obviously it would lose its natural historical nature, which is the only historical structure in my town of Nassau-Waupee. As I mentioned, it has been determined the ramp can be repaired without the addition of the ADA mobility accommodations, with the understanding that those accommodations could be accomplished by using an existing overlook tower. As a result of that survey sent by the DNR, which again I mentioned did not include the repair option, another survey was sent out by the Sturgeon Bay Historical Society, which included the two options from the DNR, but also an option to repair without the accommodations. That cost, as determined by a company called Wood Research Development, which I did some research on Wood Research Development. They're a very, very accredited company. They work specifically with wood bridges, wood towers. So, they certainly have the authority, if you will, and the knowledge to be able to make that determination. So as that survey was sent out, as of 2 weeks ago, that's the last report I got, there were 647 responses with 589 or 91% in favor of the repair. And in addition, the town of Nassau-Waupee did last Thursday approve this very similar resolution. So I would respectfully request your support.
Right. Thank you. Nissa?
I have a question. So the existing overlook near the tower, is it the same view? Is a slightly different view? I mean, we passed a resolution on equity, and not having ADA compliant is not equitable at all. And when it comes to, and I have no issue with repairing it, but the problem is it still limits other people's access to the same view as, say, me. And that's where my issues and concerns come with, because if I'm with somebody who has a mobility issue, I'm not going to leave them down on the ground while I go climb up the fun tower. I have concerns that just doing a repair without an option of a ramp or some kind of way to get everyone the same access and the same view is just horribly ableist and limits everyone's experience. So that's my concerns. Thanks.
Can you speak a moment? Oh, Sean, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think I can respond to that, and Supervisor Miller can correct me. The urgency of this resolution, from my understanding, is that if it's not repaired in a relatively soon manner, that it may deteriorate beyond repair. It's not that the town doesn't want an accessibility ramp on the tower, and I think that the town it indicated that they would consider that at a later date and be open to that. They just can't let it go through the budget process because that could be too long in order to save that tower. So what they're proposing is a repair now, and if the DNR wants to consider putting on a ramp at a later point, they don't object to that. It's just they need to act urgently to save the tower.
The way this reads though, is that if it's made a historic tower, we don't have to do any ramps. That's it, that you have this overlook. I mean, that's right in the resolution, is that if we repair it, then people don't have the same access because we don't have to, so we're not going to. That's exactly the way it reads. Where that I have issues with, because an overlook area is not the same as climbing up a tower. You might have a nice view, but it's not this. It's not going to be the same view. That's where I have issues, is that basically let's repair it for cheaper, which I don't have a problem with repairing it. I have problems with, we're going to put people in a corner so they can see something that's kind of nice, as opposed to we're going to, like Peninsula Park. I've done the ramp. It's a nice little steady walk through the woods, and I can go with anybody and they have the same exact view and same exact experience that I do, where with this, they're not at all. I mean, that's the way exactly how it reads, which is where I personally have issues, that someone who, taking my mother-in-law as an example, she would not be able to do those steps. I'd have to leave her on the ground to go up, and I'm not okay with that. So that's my concerns.
Vinny?
I have the same concerns, and I keep hearing, I read it in the survey, and maybe it was a miss of words today, but it was said an overlook tower, but there isn't an overlook tower that is for the ADA compliance. It's an overlook, which is an opening in the trees on the ground. Just to I think that that's correct. So I just want to not have it be confused that it could be reached. It doesn't say, in the resolution, it doesn't say the word overlook tower when it's referring to ADA. It just says accomplished with existing overlook, which I'm just clarifying is an opening in the trees where the road is in a parking lot or parking spaces, which is completely different than a tower. If this were to go through, is the $500,000 cost, that would not need to go into the state budget, but we would be asking the DNR to pay that from where? I mean, their items have to be in the state budget, correct? Or how would the DNR pay for this $500,000? And will the DNR want to pay something that's not ADA compliant? Doesn't that kind of violate their whole premise of state projects that are publicly funded being ADA compliant? So I'm trying to understand why we would go against that.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Speak to that. It's my understanding that anything under $1 million does not have to go through their legislative process. So they can just approve it within their existing dollars. Now, I can't answer as to where it comes from, but it's my understanding that anything over $1 million does in fact have to go before their, the legislative, approval. And I could be wrong, but that's my understanding.
Is there a specific fund within the DNR that would likely spend $500,000 for a non-ADA compliant?
Yeah, I don't. I can't answer that.
The only thing I was told through Representative Kitchens is that they can make an appropriation, and that they would have, actually, they said they have the funds to make the appropriation now, if it would be approved that way. But again, now we're getting a little bit into the politics of it all, right? In terms of the governor's budget versus representative's budget. But in essence, it does require an appropriation by the legislative body for the funding. So, but there is a threshold in terms of what that is. But yeah, either way, there's going to be some type of appropriation of funding for it.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My understanding in conversations with the Sturgeon Bay Historical Society, and just maybe because we're fortunate we live on this peninsula that has a very giving heart, people have been, there's not an official pledge, but I mean, people have said we could privately fundraise for the repair. And that way it wouldn't have to be tax dollars. And there maybe, you know, that would maybe help some people feel better about it. But the most important thing is the repair that the tower needs to make it safe and accessible is less than 50% of what the tower, you know, the tower structure. And so therefore it doesn't trigger ADA. Okay. If we are going to apply ADA like a blind hammer and smash history, because why? I mean, nobody built that tower to be discriminatory, and the tower can be repaired with private dollars. So to me, it's like, just almost take the DNR out of the equation in that regard. Like, let's save history and let's focus on looking for a cool engineering design for another kind of accessible walkway, maybe out through the trees over the escarpment or whatever it is. Let's come up with something else. Let's spend $6, $7, $8 million on another installation that's accessible, and let's not destroy history. This is getting old, and it's getting really tired, and it's very frustrating. Again, we cannot be using ADA as a blind hammer to smash history. It's insane. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll go to the voter board.
You want me to vote? Yes.
Okay, that's passed with a vote of 14 yes, 3 no, 1 abstention, and 3 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2023-22, correction of FLSA overtime miscalculation, transfer of non-budgeted funds. Dave?
3-22, the correction of FLSA overtime miscalculation, transfer of non-budgeted funds. The miscalculation, I believe, was brought to the attention of the county through the sheriff's union. It was minor. It was occurring over 2 years. It wasn't a large amount per check or anything, but it still needs to be corrected. It's going to be looked at in all other departments as well, I believe. And the total estimate for covering this is $75,000, which also includes revising the payroll software to accommodate this error. There's a transfer of up to $75,000.
Want to add anything?
Those questions, we could take questions if there's not.
Any questions on that? All right, we'll go to the voter board. 2/3 vote. Thank you. That's passed a vote of 17 yes, 4 absent. Thank you. Resolution 2023-23, approval of the agreement with Wisey Consulting Associates, correction of the payroll system, which I think we were just talking about. Dave?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-23. The correction of the payroll system. I think that's being done on a time and material basis with an estimate of up to $16,400. And this portion is just to approve that contract for the work. The dollar amount is actually included in the previous resolution.
Any questions? Go to the voter board. 2/3 vote.
No, this is no fun. It's just just a contract. So.
Yes. That's passed on the vote of 17 yes and 4 absent. Thank you. There are no ordinances this month. Special reports have been completed. New business, any oral committee reports? Review of committee minutes. A review of any vouchers, claims, or bills. Next county board meeting is March. Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, looking over the vouchers this month, I noticed that the treasurer had over 30 refund checks for taxes Was that an error in the computation of taxes, or what's the reason that were so many refund checks issued?
Again, it's pretty typical. Again, if you recall, a lot of times with your mortgage, you're working with your bank. And the bank will issue those checks in the full amount. So the individuals are bringing in their checks from the bank or their cosign, remember if you do that. And they'll make the adjustment on that. So if there's a greater amount than was on the taxes, then we issue the refund and the difference for that.
Thank you.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my question is for County Clerk. Looking at legislative exchange on next Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm just looking at the weather forecast and it could be rain, but it might be snow all Monday afternoon and evening. And I just wonder, is there anything to consider, like, because I just looked at the weather this morning and I thought, well, what if I just get up at 5 o'clock and drive down there in time, you know? Is there anything I need to do if I'm not going to be utilizing a hotel room on Monday night, let you know beforehand, or how do we, I don't know.
We're gonna be out of luck if we wait till Monday to cancel
Okay,
and we'll end up paying that
okay,
night rate.
okay. Well, it does look like, at least for now, the further south you get, it's going to be rain. So maybe the roads won't be so bad. I just thought it was worth asking the question. Thank you.
The next,
Joel says we can go at 9 o'clock.
okay, next county board meeting is March 28th at 9 a.m., not 10 a.m. 9, yes. Joel gave the approval. Did you have any announcement for me? With that, a motion to adjourn would be in order. We have a motion, a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed. Thank you, everyone.